famous. If you want to get rich, you should go to Wall Street. You know, if you want to be famous, well, I don't know how to tell you to do that. But if you want to be a working actor, I might have some advice for you.
You want to know what it takes to go from giving studio tours at Universal to starring on Showtime? After being in Hollywood and grinding for 40 years? Well, you're going to find out because today I am interviewing actor producer Tony Winters, who's going to break it all down for us. If this is your first time here, my name is Lydia Nicole, and this is Acting Smarter Now. So, for an actor who has been doing this for over 40 years, there was a period in your life, I am sure, like all of us, where you wanted to give up. What happened that you said, this is it, I'm done?
I have to be honest with you, I haven't gotten there.
You haven't?
That has never happened. I've never given up the fight. There have been times when I've had doubt. There have been moments of despair, certainly, but to finally say to myself, I'm done, it's never happened. I've always continued the fight.
Talk to me about that doubt that comes up or that questioning.
Well, it came at different in different forms and at different times. I think early on, I got very, very frustrated with the types of roles I was getting. I was usually a day player, with just a couple of lines. That went on for almost 20 years. My lines were like, police freeze, you got to call on line one, and that was it. But it was the best I could do. Not coming from New York with that Broadway background, coming from a top school and all those things, I really came up from the bottom in LA. So the progression has been slow but steady. I always seem to see light at the end of the rainbow. But yeah, there were moments when I got really frustrated with the types of roles or the size of roles or the meaning of the role that I've been able to book through the years. And I kind of said at one point, well, if Hollywood won't give me what I want to do, I'll do my own thing. And so I would have, I was writing and producing on one track, and on the other, I was auditioning and booking, in the traditional way. Yeah, I never got to the point. I've had friends do that where they said, I'm done. But that's never happened to me.
I love what you said because every actor has their own journey. And as an actor of color, we don't always get the same opportunities as a white actor.
Absolutely.
They have a quicker, if they're good, because this is not for all white actors either, but if they're good, if they're connected with the right people, their trajectory is longer. They get to do it on a bigger level quicker than we do.
All of the above. We are in total agreement.
Yeah. And so what I love that you said was, I was getting all these one-liners or these under fives, and I wanted more. And I started doing my own projects. I am a big believer and a big doer that you do not wait for anybody to give you, but this is your life, right? You get to do it. So when did that aha moment go off for you that you said, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing?
Well, it in many ways, it started with you. You're totally unaware of it, but I think it was my first year in Los Angeles. I had made a friend named Tamara Carroll, who is now Tamara Twyman, who is your good friend.
Our dear friend, my bestie. Yes, yes.
She called me one day and she says, Tony, I know this guy. He's making his own movie. He's using his credit cards. Do you want me to give him your picture and resume? And it sounded like complete BS. I said, nah, that thing isn't going anywhere. It was Hollywood Shuffle, as you know. But, Robert and Keenan and, even Spike Lee to another degree, but he was on the East Coast. Those guys inspired me that, don't wait, do it yourself. And even, and even looking, back further, I was inspired by the likes of Fred Williamson, and Leon Isaac Kennedy. Those guys were, even though I never dreamed that I would actually meet them or work with them both, which I have. Well, not Fred, but Leon. In fact, Leon got me my SAG card. Yeah, I had no idea that I would actually end up, writing and producing one day. But I had gone to see my best friend's wedding, and I had gone to see Chasing Amy. I think they came out around and I fell in love with the romantic comedy. And at the time, most black uh, writer, directors, producers were all trying to remake Boys in the Hood. They were making Dead Presidents, and movies of that sort. And I just saw the world through a different prism, and I wanted to make a romantic comedy with black people, which was at the time kind of a radical concept. And I had taken a lady friend of mine back to Detroit with me to actually make an ex-girlfriend jealous. And it kind of blew up in my face. And I couldn't, to make a long story shorter, I decided that I was going to write a screenplay based on that weekend that I had taken with her. And I wrote the screenplay, and a friend of mine helped me put together a prospectus, and I sent them out to people who I thought might have a little money to play with. And miraculously, people sent me money. So I raised like $50,000. I never had it all at the same time, but I would raise a couple of grand and we'd shoot. And then I'd send out those scenes to those people, and they would send them to other people, and people started giving me money. And I finished the movie in 2000. It premiered at the Pan African Film and Arts Festival that same year, and we won the Audience Favorite Award, which blew my mind because and people were laughing in the audience at scenes intended to be comical, and they seemed to be moved by the scenes I intended to be dramatic. And I said, "Oh, I think I got a knack for this. I no longer have the luxury of simply thinking of myself as an actor. I'm also a writer and a producer." And that was kind of the beginning of that whole journey.
Just so that our audience understand, you have credits of the wazoo. You've done over 100 and some projects. You've been in the business since the early 80s, and you are still going strong. But somewhere in your frustration, you decided, I am going to make my own. I am going to do it. So now you did this project. It was it retiring Tatiana?
Tatiana, yes.
You did this project. That's half of the battle, because the first is getting the money, then actually shooting it, completing it, and now you got to find distribution.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
Every phase, like you just mentioned, was a challenge, and even to this day, because I'm the sole owner of that intellectual property, I'm still involved with it to this day. The beauty of being a hired gun actor, you get to walk on the set, do your business, leave, collect a paycheck, and move on to the next project. But if you are the producer of a film or a TV show, you don't get that luxury. You stay with that thing for life. Nobody ever acquired it.
Which is actually a good thing, just so you know.
Yeah, a distributor was at the screening at the Pan African Film and Arts Festival. They approached me. I'm trying to think of the name of the company that distributed, but anyway, it ended up at largely at Blockbuster Video. I think we sold about 20,000 units, and so it was distributed all over the country. You can still find it on the internet, and that was largely what happened. That was the business model at that time. That was how it was done. Now it's a completely different business. But what I did make sure of is that I flipped Tatiana, and it's now available on Prime Video. Because I wanted audiences to, even though it doesn't, generate a lot of revenue, very little, in fact, but it's still available. If I want to refer someone to my work, I say, well, my film is streaming currently on Prime Video, and it's free.
Since we're talking about distribution, for
Hmm.
the audience, for that actor who is frustrated, can't break the 5 line roles, or can't get a job. Let's be honest. It's a different time than when we started. It's
Yes.
just a different time, good and bad. There's pro and there's con. But for that actor who is trying to get their stuff off and do a project and come along with something that they feel good about, that they go, here, this is a showcase piece for me, where you were, what we went through with Hollywood Shuffle. Today, you have aggregators. So, meaning there are companies that you can take your project to for a couple of grand, and they will put it on all the platforms.
I was approached by someone very recently about Tatiana for that.
Yeah, and we didn't have that opportunity back then. It was major distribution or nothing. And then if you were smart enough, you started taking it to all the different festivals to hopefully get a distributor. And then about maybe 15 years ago, AMC got into the business of working with indie filmmakers, and they would allow you to put your film in their theater for a week for 20 grand. The first time they did it, it was you could put your film up for a night, but with the caveat that you had to sell the tickets. You had to sell at least half of the tickets 2 weeks before the date. If you did not, the money went back to whoever bought the ticket, and that was it. But then they changed it, and it was 20 grand. You had to provide the video in a digital format. So basically you're having to spend another 25 grand, because the digital film is going to run you about 2 grand to get done. And then you have to, there's a couple of other things you have to do, and then you got to give them 20 grand up front. Wow. Whatever you make from that is yours at the box office. And if you can get seats, butts in the seats that week, they will give you another run. They will keep the film in another week. So it's a better time now for aspiring filmmakers, people who are doing their own things, be it an actor or just somebody who wants to make their own project and put it in a theater. It's a better time. But when you were doing it, sir, that was not available, nor did you have any of the tools. So I applaud you, because it's difficult to make a movie anyway. But when you're making a movie with $2.50 and just a hammer and nails, it's very challenging. So I applaud you. And that was your first time out the gate doing your own thing. Then you did it again, this time with a play called Section 8.
Yes.
You want to walk us through what that was? Because now you've done Retiring Tatiana. Right. Now you have an idea of how to be a producer as an actor.
In the wake of Retiring Tatiana, it was so well received, and the distribution went so well that I sat down and I started writing everything that I had ever conceived of for myself as an actor. And one of them was a play that I had thought of years ago about that period of my life when I was in college, and I moved in with my father and his girlfriend in San Diego. And so I had written the play, and I thought, well, if I produce the play with all these, with theater, there's long monologues, and so there's no way that I could trust an actor, give him a monologue, and he comes to the set 2 days later and he's going to know it. So I said, well, if we get the play up and running in front of a live audience, we can come in while the theater is dark.
What does that mean, while the theater is dark?
Like the show ran Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the theater was dark. It just was sitting there, empty. So the theater was dark in the early part of the week. So that's when I brought in a film crew, and we shot on that beautiful set that we had constructed. We shot it film style in chronological order as to the best of our ability, and did it without the audience. And that's how it was done. So I had a play running and I was shooting a film simultaneously. And that was kind of how I figured was the best way to attack that project. And it worked out. In fact, it won an award at the Arizona Black Film Showcase. It won Best Feature Film. It remains available, and it too is running on Prime Video as we speak.
So now you got 2 projects under your belt. and
Right.
you decide to do a one-man show.
Yes.
All right. So now this is a whole nother animal. So take me through that one-man show process.
Oh, wow. Well, that was born of a very dark time in my life. A very dark time. I was divorcing. I was selling my house. I was going through a real lull in my legitimate acting career, my Hollywood career, I guess suffice it to say. A friend of mine, Stogie Kenyatta, he suggested to me, he says, Tony, you know what you need to do? You need to do a one-man show. He's been doing, Paul Robeson around the country for a couple of decades. And I thought about it and I said, me on stage by myself, would anybody be interested in coming to see that? And, I didn't want to write about any childhood traumas. I really didn't know what to do. And then I remembered a friend of mine named J. Darrell Williams, right here in North Hollywood. He had around 1990, he had invited me to see a one-man show that he had done that he was doing called The Devil and Billy Markham, written by Shel Silverstein. And so I went to see him, and he was wonderful in the show, but the material was absolutely brilliant. I said, "Oh, I'm going to do that one day." So I run over to Samuel French on Sunset, and I buy a copy of it, and I throw it in my closet and say, "One day I'm going to get to it." Well, fast forward, what, 25 years later, I go rummaging through my collection and I find it, and I started to learn it. This was at the beginning of 2013. I started to learn it, and page by page, it consists of 5, 10, 15-minute monologues. And I started to learn it page by page, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence. And my son would come over, and I say, see if I know this passage right here. And eventually, over the course of the year, I learned the entire piece. I said, I think I could do this in front of an audience. So I went to my friend Cy Richardson and I said, Cy, I've been working on something. I want you to take a look at it and tell me what you think. So I did it for him in his living room. And he said, I think you can do this in front of an audience, but what you're going to have to do is, because I was just going to do it straight, meaning I was just going to do it as the storyteller, just tell the story. He said, no, all those different characters that he references throughout the piece, you have to embody a new character, a new persona for each one of those characters. And I was like, wow, I'd never done anything like that before. But that's what he directed me to do. And I found each of those wonderful characters inside of myself. And I opened in February of 2014 at Theater on Pico, and everybody turned out. It was a wonderful experience for me as an actor. It was a wonderful exercise for me as a producer. I have no regrets. And then a friend of mine, she was in town from Detroit, a very successful businesswoman. She came to see the show. And she said, Tony, I'd love to put on your show in Detroit. I said, well, do you know what that'll cost? And I gave her a figure. And she said, no problem, let's do it. And she actually produced it on her end. I got in just a couple of nights before with my tech guy, just he and I. We performed it in front of my hometown audience, which was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my career. Because I had never acted in Detroit, growing up. It never even occurred to me. So yeah, that's kind of the story behind The Devil and Billy Markham, and it too is available in sections on YouTube.
You have hit on three different mediums that you had the nerve to produce yourself, to take a chance, first of all, on yourself as an actor,
Hmm.
and then say, I'm going to do this myself. I want to know, what did you learn, first of all, from doing Retiring Tatiana? What were a couple of things that you learned having to go through it, not having a blueprint, but just figuring it out as you went?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so much. I guess the simple answer would be that we're all capable of doing so much more than we give ourselves credit for. We're operating on about 10% of our capability when, there's so much more that we can do. And again, I realized that I was no longer simply an actor. I was also a writer. I was also a producer. I was also a guy who was capable of doing a degree of PR and putting butts in seats. I was just capable of so much more than learning lines and showing up on set. You know what I mean? I think that is the biggest takeaway from the Tatiana experience for me.
And you were also a fundraiser because you had to raise funds to get that stuff made.
Yes.
So I just wanted to include that in your line of
Yeah.
what you learned.
What I'll just add to that is that Tatiana was one of the first films shot on digital. We shot on digital because I couldn't shoot feature film on $50,000. You know what I mean? So this is at the dawn of the digital film era, which everybody shoots on now. But in 1998, 1999, it was a pretty radical concept to shoot on video. And we got the movie Film Looked. Film Look was a thing at that time. Now it's in the camera, but it was a process that we had to undergo to make it look
Right,
more.
because it looked like TV. It
Yeah,
looked like
exactly.
live TV. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So the technology was out there, but I just availed myself to it. Yeah.
So now you're doing Section 8, you're doing it as a play, you're
Hmm.
producing it. Again, did you have a budget? Because from what I've gleaned, you again were trying to figure it out. How are we going to get this done?
Yeah, I had a little money. I had a producer from Detroit who kicked in, and I had some money of my own. I know the old adage is, you never use your own money, but who else was gonna invest in my projects other than myself? And I also had the revenue from the stage play. So I had three sources of income, and that's what I used.
Okay, so I just want to go back one step because you're doing the play. Where did the money come to produce the play? Because that's another costly. That costs a lot of money to stand up a play, whether it's a week, a 6 week run, a month run. Those theater owners want their money.
Oh yeah.
They don't care if nobody's there. They want their. You better give them their money.
You're absolutely right. The original 15K, well, it was somewhere between $15,000 to mount the play.
And did you do it for how many days or how many weeks did you
I
have
think
to
we ran
run?
for 3 weekends, if memory serves.
Okay.
And that gave us about 9 shooting days there, give or take. And but like I said, everybody was off book. Everybody knew their stuff cold, and I figured we were going to breeze through it. But the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. So, but we did get through it. And the seed money for that came from my investor in Detroit.
Okay. God
Yeah,
bless your investor.
man, it wouldn't be possible without him. Yeah.
What did you learn from starting with a play and then shooting it? What were some of the things you learned? We could start with the play first and then we'll go into shooting the play because that's another challenge unto itself.
Well, the biggest takeaway for Section 8 for me was it's extremely personal, but Section 8 was the time I spent with my father. The last time we were together under the same roof for almost a year, and I showed up on his front porch with a real chip on my shoulder because he had been kind of absent from my life for most of my teen years. So it was very cathartic for me to sit down. In fact, I played my father's character, and hired a wonderful young actor named Akeem Smith to play my son, who was essentially me. And when I sat down and wrote that play, it was very cathartic for me because it really gave me the outline, the arc of my father's life. And it made me understand him better and some of the decisions he made in his life, both, positive and negative choices that he made throughout his life. But I understood him better and I gave him grace. So that's the biggest takeaway. It was a very personal project for me.
At that time, had you had your son already?
He was 2 years old, maybe. No, he wasn't even that old because we have video of him in rehearsals. I think he was about 3. Yeah, he was about 3 years old. He was a very small child. Yeah,
Because at that period, now you are a father,
yeah,
revisiting your father, understanding a little bit more what the father role is. So it's an interesting, it's
yeah.
because when we're kids going through stuff with our parents, we don't see their side. You know, we have our own issues. We don't have that ability to process, oh, they've got issues too.
Yeah. What did I take away from performing the play? That I really enjoy live theater. I had missed it. It was the first time I had done a play in at that point. It had probably been almost 10 years since I've been on the stage, and I still have a real Jones for it. As an actor, you know, performing in a good piece, be it on stage or in front of a camera or whatever, that's a wonderful degree of satisfaction that you glean from that. But to produce a play and memorize your own words and have a wonderful ensemble of actors around you, bringing their A game to the table and playing out your story in front of a live audience, there's just no substitute for that. It was one of the highlights of my life thus far. No doubt about it. Shooting the film under a lot of pressure. You always need more time and you always need more money. When you're not paying everybody top dollar, you sometimes have to get the best you can. Like we had this one scene, the climactic scene at the end where all the characters are on stage and everything comes to a head. There was no way we could shoot it in the traditional sense. Everybody got a close up or a 3 shot or a 2 shot, and doing the wide. We couldn't do it like that. We didn't have enough time. We had just a few hours. And my cinematographer said, Tony, I'm gonna just go handheld. Going handheld, it added to the chaotic nature of the scene. You know what I mean? It was a blessing that we didn't foresee that really makes that scene tick. And so sometimes, not having all the resources, not having, everything at your fingertips, having millions of dollars and a crew of, 50 people can sometimes bring out, you know, creativity in you that, again, you didn't even know you had. And it turned out to be one of the best scenes in the movie. So, yeah, sometimes you don't need a lot to accomplish a lot.
You never need a lot to accomplish a lot.
Okay, I love that.
If we want to get it done, we get it done. It's the perception that
Hmm.
you need to have because you're trying to compete. It's like you being in junior high trying to compete with doctorate students who are in doctorate programs. You're on different levels. I can't compete with a studio. There's no way I can compete with a studio. So what can I do?
Hmm.
That's when you are the hyphen, you're the actor, the writer, the producer, some actor, writer, director, producer, publicist, audience wrangler. You are doing all this stuff. You're the funder. You're what do you call it?
Yeah.
You're getting the funding. You are having to take on all these jobs that if you had a production company or you had a studio, you would have people to do that. But the beauty is in you doing it all, you get an understanding of what it takes to make a project. And it's not just about you being the actor. And I love how you said that, I could be the actor, do my lines and go home. And here I had to do it. It was
Yeah, you don't
me.
get to walk away.
That's right.
You have to do everything you can't afford to pay somebody to do, which was a lot of things from, bringing it, moving equipment or setting up lights or, sweeping up at the end of the night. That's all on you if you can't hire someone to do it.
That's
That's what a
right.
producer does, and that's what I did. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
So you did the movie, then you do the play, you shoot the play. Now you're doing your one man show. What do you learn from that one man show that you thought, okay, I know how to do this because I've done it twice before. I can do this. What did you learn?
Oh my goodness, Lydia, you are going deep. I think the one man show kind of brought me, this almost circles back to your first question. It really almost does because I think doing the one man show, doing The Devil and Billy Markham kind of brought me back from the abyss. I think the closest I came to quitting, now that you asked that question, it kind of stimulates the answer, was around 2015, 2016. I had done the show and my agent of almost 20 years had left the business. I had my commercial agent had dropped me for reasons that had nothing to do with anything. I don't want to get into it, but I'm back with them now, but my commercial agent had dropped me at that time, and things were looking rather bleak. And a friend of mine turned me on to a management company who are my current managers, and they just took my career and reconfigured it. I had a new agent, I had a new commercial agent, I had them as my management team, I had representation in the Southeast, I had representation in New York, Chicago. So I had been casting my net wider. So anyway, all that happened as a result of me leaning into my art. My art has been the through line of my life since I was 19 years old. At that time when I truly needed it, like I said, I was going through a really rough personal patch in my life. My career was on the skids. My marriage was breaking up. I was missing my child who I wasn't seeing on a regular basis until we got the custody agreement worked out. And I just kind of thought, you know, maybe I'm done, but I wasn't. I found the joy again in my work through that piece. My belief in self had been renewed. You know what I mean? And I just went back at it. I found this manager, and I'm enjoying the best chapter of my career since 2015 or so. So I say the last 10 years that I ever had. The roles are better. I'm working with top talents from Academy Award winners to multiple Emmy Award winners. And that's the kind of company I've been constantly thrust into for like I said, for the past 15, 10 years or so. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited to keep moving forward. I don't I can see the finish line, but I don't know how far away it is, if that
I
makes
love
any
that. No,
sense.
no, no. I love that. You just said something: dedication, commitment, endurance, and persistence. That is a career that you have endured the ups and downs. You've dug your heels in and said, "This is my business." You've disciplined yourself to say, "I can do this and more." You've dedicated yourself to elevate your art, because you could just be doing one liners all your life, and for some people that's good enough.
Right.
For some people that is good. I remember when I first came, and I'm sure it's the same for you, because we came to LA about the same time. I came in 78, you came in the early 80s.
84.
Around that time, I remember meeting a bunch of actors that they did day player work,
Hmm.
and they were able to get houses from that. Back then, the pay was much better. And I met actors who made a career at being an extra,
Hmm.
and they got to be on TV sets, on TV shows. They were like the regular extras on the TV shows, and they had houses, and they knew the actors, and they were comfortable, and they were happy. And no shade on them, but if you want more, you got to do more. And so you're talking about you doing more because that was not acceptable for you. It was not enough. It's like your soul needed more stimulation in your craft.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to how you met Leon Isaac Kennedy, because I think this is, God takes care of babies and fools. And so
I'm
I just
somewhere in
love
between.
I love this. I love this. I love this story.
The first job I got in Los Angeles was as a tour guide at Universal Studios. One of the aspects of the job was sometimes you were tasked to do the LTD, which is the last tram of the day, which is the least fun tram to do. There's nobody coming behind you. The lot is closing down. Lights are, things are going dark, and people are going home. Meanwhile, you're still out there. Over here on the left is, the house where Beaver lived in. Leave It to Beaver. Over here is the Munster house. That sort of thing. And so anyway, I got tasked to do the LTD one night.
I want you to go back because there's a little bit more before we get to this story of how determined you were to get to Los Angeles.
Oh, I
I,
didn't want to go back that far.
I do because I think it's important. It shows what we were just talking about, your tenacity, your commitment, your dedication. So you were in San Diego
Right.
doing theater.
Well, it actually even goes back before that, uh,
Okay.
Lydia. Between my junior and senior year in high school, my younger brother and I were kind of wilding out on the streets of Detroit and having brushes with the law, that sort of thing. Nothing serious, but enough to raise my mother's concern. And she says, "You know what? You're going to spend the summer in San Diego with your father. I'm not putting up with this." So she put my younger brother and I and my older brother on a Greyhound bus to San Diego, California. 3 days on a Greyhound. We get to San Diego, and I can't believe it. Even though I was born there, I was raised in Detroit. I can't believe it. Clear blue skies, palm trees, the Pacific Ocean. I saw all this stuff for the first time. And my aunt, who I'm still very close to, God bless her, my father's brother's wife, my Uncle Garfield's wife, Aunt Marva, she took my younger brother and I and her kids, she had kids about our age, and just showed us Southern California. She even took us to Los Angeles. And I saw the Chinese theater for the first time, and we took the Universal Studios tour, which blew my mind because Hollywood suddenly became a real thing at that point. It's like, oh, okay. In Detroit, we make cars and trucks and tires. It's just a company town. And in LA, it's also a company town. They make movies and television shows and music, and it's a company town. It's very real. It was tangible. And I had this notion, I don't know where it came from, that I wanted to be a professional actor. I wanted to be an actor. I would watch Bewitched and see an actor, a guest star on the show, and then, 2 weeks later I'd see him on Mannix. And I was like, how do you get to do that? That's what I want to do. I want to be one of those guys. And well, anyway, so I got back to Detroit and I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but one day I'm coming back to Hollywood and I'm going to be a tour guide at Universal Studios. So I went to San Diego after graduation. That was as close to Hollywood as I could get because I had family there and, some friends. So after 4 years of doing theater in San Diego, my younger brother was killed in a carjacking incident. So I decided I wanted to move to Los Angeles now. So I said, well, I can get a job as a tour guide. I've been doing theater, same thing. So I go up and I caught a Greyhound up, didn't even have a car. I got a bunch of applications. Back in those days, you had to get physical applications. Took them back to San Diego, filled them all out, and sent in like one a month for like 6 months. And they called me for an interview. I don't pass the first interview. I bomb, because what they do is they ask you to stand up and talk about your favorite movie and your least favorite movie for 5 minutes. Now, while I had been accustomed to speaking, doing theater and doing monologues and that sort of thing, speaking extemporaneously was a completely different animal. And like I said, I bombed. So I went back to San Diego and I thought, why not try again? So I called the guy on the phone who had set up my interview and he said, yeah, come on back up. So what I did was you had to talk about your favorite movie and your least favorite movie for 5 minutes. So I wrote a monologue, timed it out and everything, memorized it, came back from my interview and nailed it and got the job. And that was the beginning of my journey to Los Angeles. I was making $3 an hour, giving tours at Universal Studios.
So how did you get housing at that time?
Oh
Because
boy, I had $35 when I came here. A guy I met at that second interview, and I just fell into conversation. He's one of my dearest friends these days, named Tom Steinhoff, and he directed Retiring Tatiana.
wow.
Anyway, I met him, and he says, "Hey, man, you can." I said, "Yeah, I got to get up here and find a place to live." He says, "Well, you can stay with me while we train." So I crashed on his couch for about 2 weeks. His manager at the building here in North Hollywood was starting to get on his case about there being a third person in the unit. And at that time, I think it was a bit of a racist thing because at that time there weren't any black folks in this area. And so I knew one other guy in Los Angeles, and I didn't want to get Tom into any trouble with his management. So I called my friend. I said, "Hey man, I don't have anywhere to go." And he said, "Well, come on out here to Inglewood and crash on my couch." And I said, "Ernie," his name was Ernie Moore, God rest his soul. He said, "Come on out here and crash on my couch." And I said, "Ern, I'll be there 2 weeks tops, man." I was there for the next 5 years.
Wow.
Well, I say it like that because it's funny, but he was sharing a two-bedroom with another guy, and then a three-bedroom became available in the building shortly after I got there, and we all three moved into the three-bedroom. Everybody had a reduction in rent as a result, and it was the place where I was able to, kind of gather myself and meet people and make friends, and that was the beginning of my hard scrabble time in LA. Man, I hadn't thought about that in a long. I get a little emotional when I think about Ernie and the kindness that he showed me, because that doesn't happen every day, for a person to open their doors to you and give you shelter. I don't think anybody would be more proud of me than Ernie would be today if had he lived.
So now you are on the last tram giving the tour,
Oh, I forgot that part.
and something happens on that.
Yes. Last time of the day, I flip a switch. Usually you just kind of phone it in, this is that. And Robert Redford ran into this alley in the movie The Sting, that sort of thing. But I said, you know what? These people paid decent money to be on this tram. There was only about 20 of them on that tram, which holds about 300 people. And most of them were Japanese, but there were two black guys seated in the back. And I just said I'm gonna give them 100%. And so I told every joke, every story, every corny anecdote I knew, and we just had a blast, just us three, because they were the only three that understood what was going on. Well, anyway, when we got back, one of the black guys, he walks up to me. He's wearing this big hat with dark glasses, and he says, "Hey man, I just wanted to let you know you did a really great job on that tour." And I looked at him and said, "Excuse me, are you Leon Isaac Kennedy?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "What are you up to?" And he says, "Well, I just finished this project and I'm co-producing a movie called Penitentiary 3." And ignorance being bliss, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to ask him this, but I said, "Hey, since you're producing, maybe you can help me out. I'm an actor and I'm trying to get my SAG card." And he said, "Okay," which doesn't happen. But he wrote down his phone number. This was like March. He said, "Call me in June." And when we go into production, I called him on June 1st. He remembered me, set up a meeting with me and the director. I go into their Wilshire Boulevard Museum Square offices, and Jamal Fanaka, the director, looks at me. Leon explains how we met. Jamal looks at me and says, "Well, he looks like he's got some sense, so let's make him one of the reporters in that press conference scene." And I'm like, "Fellas, I'm sitting right here." And yeah, I had two or three lines, and that was the beginning of my professional acting career. I couldn't believe I made $500 for one day. I had been doing theater where we rehearsed for 3 months and perform for the next, and I wouldn't get a dime. But yeah, that was the beginning of my professional acting career.
Did you get the SAG card, or did you qualify for SAG?
I became SAG eligible, and at that time, I think the initiation fee was like $500 or something. Like it was the equivalent to like a day's work,
Right.
and I think SAG minimum at the time was like $500. So all you needed was one day, and you could join and take that pay and join the union, and that's what I did. And additionally, I got a job after I left Universal as a page at NBC, and at the time they were shooting soap operas there, Santa Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
Days of Our Lives, and a couple of sitcoms. And most of the pages, they wanted to be studio executives, publicists, behind the scene types.
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of the few that wanted to be a performer. So I would go around to all the casting offices, dropping off my picture and resume. And eventually they started calling me. and they started using me as like a one or two line cop on Santa Barbara, and what at that time you could get your first check, but by your second check, you were a must join for after.
They took
Yeah.
that money. That happened to me. They took that money and then they said, and you owe us. And now
Right.
you owe us.
But it was only a couple after 3 or 4 jobs because they would call me like once a month to be like a cop, you know, police freeze. I used to joke I was on every police force on television, and eventually they paid off my after so that's how I became SAG-AFTRA, and
Hmm.
it was largely through my work on daytime television.
And I heard you say something that you only did extra work on soap operas. And I
Yes.
have never heard this before. Can you tell me why you only did extra work on soap operas?
In addition to Tamra, I had another good friend named Charles Champion, and those two really taught me the acting hustle between the two of them. And just by the by, you need a Tamra, you need a Charles in your life when you get here because you can end up spinning your wheels for years and never getting anywhere. But Charles told me, he said, you can do extra work on soaps because there's no rerun to come back and haunt you. And I was like, that's brilliant. And at the time, there were a lot of soap operas being produced around Los Angeles. Now I think there's three, maybe
Mm-hmm.
four. But at that time, each network had like five. You know what I mean? So it was definitely a source of revenue early on. But eventually I worked my way into being a under five player on every soap. I did Bold and the Beautiful, General Hospital. I was recurring on Days of Our Lives. I was recurring on Santa Barbara. That was those were my humble beginnings.
I love it. I love it. I think it's important that actors know that it is a long haul, that you work your way. It is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's important. Um, I heard you say something in an interview that when you came out, you didn't really have a due date of I need to make it by this date.
I had very realistic expectations because again, working in theater in San Diego, I would meet a lot of actors who had came down to work at the Old Globe or the San Diego Rep who were professional working actors in Los Angeles. And so they would tell me about the grind up here, what it was like. And so I didn't come up here thinking, Hollywood was going to fall in love with me overnight and that, 6 months later I'd be a star of a television show. I was expecting to be a 20-year overnight success. You know what I mean? I was prepared for the long haul. And so I didn't have those pie in the sky notions. I just put my head down and said, I'm going to be a working actor. I never focused on fame. I never focused on wealth and all those sorts of things. We all want to make a good living, but those were not the driving factors. If you want to get rich, you should go to Wall Street. If you want to be famous, well, I don't know how to tell you to do that. But if you want to be a working actor, I might have some advice for you.
You're now in Los Angeles. You got your cards. You're union. You are a working actor. What are you starting to do? How did you find an agent? How did you start tapping into community out here?
Well, my first community were my tour guide friends, which really was one of the smartest things I ever did because so many of them have gone on and done wonderful things in this business. Tony Sepulveda was one of my buddies who is the vice president of casting at, Warner Brothers now. Tori Harold was a friend of mine who was a casting director for a time. Sandy Logan, who was vice president of casting at Disney. Steve Hafer, Katie Garrettson, are both television sitcom directors, and Steve has called me in on things, or nobody's ever given me a job, but everybody's given me opportunity to come in and read. Having that network of friends, and then the people who just ended up in other places as writers, as producers, have been a wonderful start. My first agent came about by. Do you remember Simply Blues
Oh, of course.
on the corner of Sunset and
Oh,
Vine?
yes.
I used to go there after work a lot. And I was up there and I was, I thought I was Don Juan in those days, and I was trying to talk to a young lady. And she said, "Well, you must be an actor." I said, "Yeah, I am. Guilty as charged." She said, "Do you have an agent?" And I said, "No, I don't have an agent." She said, Would you like to meet mine?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Harry." She taps this guy sitting next to her on his shoulder. Anyway, his name was Harry Stanfus. His name was really Harry. That's who you expect your first agent's name to be, right? Harry. He was a, balding, portly guy with a cigar smoker. And he gave me his card, International Talent Agency. Well, I'm thinking, wow, man, that's going to be on some ivory tower in Century City. Well, it was on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. And it was a one-room office, with actor headshots and resumes strewn all about. And anyway, I go in there and we sit down and we talk for a few minutes. I had just gotten my SAG card, and I had just done a play at LA Valley College called Living Fat. And I knew this wonderful monologue at the time. And Harry asked me, he said, "Well, because I didn't have any tape. Nobody had tape at that time." And he said, "Can you do something for me?" So I got up in his little office and I did the monologue from Living Fat. And he signed me. And I think my first booking through him was on an episode of Houston Nights,
Oh my God.
CBS Houston Nights. I read for a guest star, but I ended up getting this like one line role. But I was happy to get it. You know what I mean? And that was my first agent.
And how long were you with him?
Must have been a year or two. And then he calls me one day and he says, "Tony, what you doing tonight?" I'm thinking he want to meet me for a drink or something. I said, "Oh, I got nothing going." He said, "Hey, can you come and help me move?" Like, what? So anyway, I drive over there and it's the saddest scene you ever saw. He had this little pickup truck parked in front of the building, and he was taking all of his stuff out and putting it in his pickup truck. And I joined in and I helped him. And I was looking down Hollywood Boulevard, and I said, I can see why they call this the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. You know what I mean? Because this
Mhm.
international talent agency was coming to an end. And I said, well, it's time for me to move on. And Tam arranged for a meeting with me at Sutton Barth and Venari, and that became my commercial agent. I was on a set. I was on a set. I can't remember what set it was. In fact, I think I may have been doing atmosphere work, and I heard this guy talking about an agency that it was new to the Valley called Feature Players. Now, most people just think of guest stars and co-stars, but when you and I started, there was the featured role.
No, and I remember that agency.
Oh,
I
you remember
remember,
Feature
oh,
Players?
very much. Yes.
Dolores Chevron and I can't think of the Jackie something or another. But anyway, they were right over there, right across from CBS Radford Studios. And somehow he mentioned them and how this guy that was on this set, he was talking about on the call sheet, all the actors who were in the smaller roles were all from Feature Players. So I said, well, that's where I need to go. So somehow I got a meeting with them. I don't remember exactly how. Maybe I sent them a picture and resume in the mail. Anyway, they called me in, signed me, and that's where I started really accumulating
They were
legitimate.
hardworking women. I
Oh yeah.
remember, I mean, I had I was with artists first, but they were at that time, but they were hardworking women. And I was in a group called Actors Rapping Together. And so part of the group, it was it was a community. It was a early community where you paid monthly, was like 20 actors. None of us were the same. And that was the rule. Nobody could be in the group if there was somebody already of that type. You could not have anybody, and you couldn't bring anybody in until either we didn't have that type in the group, or who we had was leaving or kicked
Ah.
out, or they got kicked out. Because yeah, oh yeah, the woman who ran it, she was no joke. You had two times that you could come without tips for the group, because a lot of it was sharing tips with each other. Whether it was new agents, or this agency is looking for so and so, or there's an audition going somewhere, or I had an audition, and Tony, you would be great for it. You had to bring something to the table. There was
Ah,
no, you couldn't come and eat from the table if you didn't bring anything. They let you get away with it twice. The third time you were out.
wow. And they were
You were
very
out.
serious about it.
Yeah, and you paid $20 a month, and you were in the group, and we met on Hollywood Boulevard. I think it was Hollywood and Sycamore. It was a little church. It is now owned by Scientology, but we would meet there every Monday at 5 p.m. I think it was. We went from 5 to 7, and it really was a group. It was probably the first community I belonged to.
Hmm.
Like, you're meeting people and stuff, but I was building a community. And and as you're talking, and I've heard you in the interviews, community has been very important for you in that, and I don't think that most actors, especially those that are starting out, understand the importance of building a community. If you come to Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, whatever city that you are pursuing your craft, and there are a group of actors, it's important to connect and start to just take ownership of what you're doing and getting to know people. So you started talking about community with the people that you worked with at Universal. But once you started working as an actor, a professional actor, how did you start to find your tribe?
A lot of the people who are my best friends to this day are people I met doing theater in Los Angeles. Because you're with them, for 2 or 3 months just rehearsing. You get there after work, whatever you're doing, during the day. You get there at 7, and you guys are together till 11 o'clock rehearsing this play, wherever it happens to be. And you form friendships, you form bonds. And I did so much of that early on that, again, and then you meet people through them, and that became my community. Absolutely. People I've either worked with, people I did theater with, or, sometimes you just meet people randomly at auditions and you guys click, exchange phone numbers, and you hang out. And like I said, I've got the same group of friends for the most part that I've been running with the same group from the mid 90s, you know, and some go back as far as the mid 80s.
You talk about Carl Gilliard and Cy Richardson, who are two theater animals who directed a lot in LA, who really have made their mark in the Black theater community. And they directed you, right? Because Carl did Section 8.
Right.
Now, did Cy do your one man show?
Yes, I directed my one man show. Yes.
Because I think it's important that actors know that those people that you're building community with are also going to be the people sometimes that help you in your journey, that
Yeah.
they're going to show up. And you mentioned your friend who you worked with at Universal, who became the guy who directed a retiring Tatiana. So I just want to hit home how important community is for actors.
And even outside of acting, most of these people, okay, in my particular case, and I believe in yours, I was 22, 23 years old. I was at the beginning of my journey very much, as were most of them. So I've been there through marriages, through childbirth, through graduations. They've all been a part. I've been a witness to their journey as they have been to mine. So, even outside of acting, you will need people just to have a life. And it's so important for you to do right by people and not burn bridges because, it's just not a good practice. I like to think nobody can say too many bad things about me in this life, You want to hold on to your friends because they're the ones that are going to uplift you during those hard times. And that is one of the big lies they tell about this business, especially if you grew up watching movies and TV as much as I did. You kind of tend to think that Hollywood is a cutthroat place and everybody's out to get you. Everyone wants to stab you in the back. Nothing can be farther from the truth, at least in my experience. I have the most wonderful group of friends who are absolutely supportive of me as I am them. When they get a job, I celebrate them. I'm competing with for the same job many times. And when they get it, I'm happy for them. Of course, I would have been happier had I gotten the gig, but I'm happy for them. And it's just a wonderful support team that you're going to need because this can be a very lonely endeavor. So you will need others, people to love on you, and you'll need to love on others.
And if you work in this business long enough, you're going to come up against getting fired from a job because you were miscast, or halfway through they decided they want to go a different route and they've already hired you. You've already done maybe a day of rehearsal. And now they're like, you know what? We want Charlie for this because Charlie really is the one who will work. And to have that group of friends who say, hey, it wasn't your fault when it wasn't your fault. I mean, then maybe it was your fault, but you want that
Right.
group of friends who just embrace you, who gather around and support you and say you're going to make it through, or a breakup,
Hmm.
because I know I've had friends longer than I've had relationships, love relationships. They're still my friends. And
Right.
it is important to have that team of people who get you, understand you, can also call you out, that can hold you accountable. Because it's not just, oh, you're great, but it's saying, you know what, you're being a dickhead right now, and you
Yeah.
need to stop. You need to stop.
That was one of the reasons I hired Tom Steinhoff to be my director on Tatiana because I know he would tell me the truth. He's one of my oldest and dearest friends, and I know that if we were going off the rails, he'd be the first to tell me. And I needed somebody to be able to do this, especially if you're an actor and you're the writer and you're the producer. You need somebody to say, no, this isn't going to work. He cut scenes, that and as the writer, what do you mean? You cut off my finger, you know, cut off my finger, man. Don't cut my scene. That's why I gave him that job because I needed somebody to be able to tell me the truth. And gosh, that's funny. We're talking about this. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at a party over the weekend. I was talking to a gentleman who's a major television star, another friend of mine who used to be an actress and now she's a television writer. She walked up and rudely dismissed me and introduced herself to him. And if it had been anybody but her, I would have checked them right then. But because of our 30, 35-year friendship, I said, I'll wait and address this later. And I texted her yesterday and let her know in no uncertain terms that I didn't appreciate, her actions on Saturday night. And she wrote me back and I said, as your friend, I'm telling you this in love, and friends tell each other the truth, and I'm letting you know how I felt. And she wrote me back a wonderful apology. I said, hey, all is forgiven, all is forgotten, you know. So you need people to tell you the truth. As I told her and she accepted it, she wasn't defensive. She copped to it, and we moved on. But yeah, you got to have people in your life who will tell you the truth.
Yeah, who hold you accountable.
Yeah,
They hold you accountable. I think that is so important. I'm gonna take a side road here for a minute. Something that, well, I heard you say a couple of things in interviews, and I want to address it, which is you read a lot of biographies.
I do.
I heard you mention reading a biography on Sidney Poitier and one on Sammy Davis. So, what made you decide to start reading biographies of famous actors?
I guess because I had no roadmap. I had no idea. Like when I came out of I remember going to my guidance counselor in high school and told him, I said, I want to be an actor. And I might as well have told him I wanted to be an astronaut. He had no clue as to what to tell me. And instead of doing a little research and telling me to, maybe you should apply to this institution called Juilliard or the American Conservatory Theater or the American Academy of Dramatic Arts or something like that, he didn't have a clue. So I would go to the library and I'd pick up books about people who have done it. And that was pretty much how I started reading biographies, and I still read them all the time now. If I hear about somebody who's written one, I'll probably run over to bookstore and pick one up because I just enjoy it. I like seeing how they got from A to A to Z. You know what I mean?
That brings me to you reading Sidney Poitier's biography,
Hmm.
and then you have the moment where you are cast in sneakers, the poster behind you. One of my I love that movie. I love anything with Robert Redford, just so you know. Because you read his book when you were in the room with him, it gave you stuff to talk about.
Yes.
And so you tell the story of you being in the rehearsal process, which I found fascinating because when we started, they would have rehearsals for movies that before they started shooting, that you got no, that you got to come on in a rehearsal space and meet everybody. They don't have that so much now, but you got to be in the rehearsal space. You tell it great, so I want you to tell the story.
Well, actually, it was a table read.
Oh,
It
table
was it
read,
was a table
yes.
read at the beginning of the of production. I got invited to attend, and all I knew that it was a Robert Redford movie. This was circa 1991, 92-ish. And so I was prepared for Robert Redford, who was a huge star to me, especially coming up in the 1970s. He was the way we were, the hot rock, the Sting. He was the Brad Pitt of our youth. You know what I mean? So I was really excited to meet him. But anyway, I get to the soundstage 27 at Universal Studios, where I had been a tour guide 5 years prior, going by on my tram. But now I'm working there, and trams are going by. But I'm there. I guess I get there a little early, and in walks, Redford. I was ready for him, and then in walks Dan Aykroyd. I was like, oh, okay. In walks River Phoenix. Like, oh, okay, David Strathairn and Mary McDonnell and all these, and even at one point, Sidney Poitier walks in with James Earl Jones. They're walking in together. And an actor, an African American actor, seeing Sidney Poitier and and James Earl Jones walking into the soundstage together, I was like, holy F. You know what I mean? Holy smoke. I couldn't believe that I was on a film with these guys. Anyway, they come in and sit down, and we have this table read, and I'm sitting there with my one line. I got one line in the movie, and it's in the last page, I think. So I had to sit there and watch everybody read, and I kind of marveled at how they just talk to each other. Nobody was trying to act. They just talked to each other. I said, so that was one of the lessons I learned. But later on the sound stage, when we were actually shooting, and I had a week on the movie, and you know what a week is like. That's a lot of time on a movie because it's 12-hour days. So I became familiar with all of them, which was wonderful. Especially River Phoenix and I really, really connected. In fact, I have a wonderful photo where, because I would get my little instant camera and bring it to set. And he said, I said, River, can I get a picture with you? And he said, you want a picture with everybody, man? I said, well, yeah. And he went and got all these guys, and they came and took a picture with me, which is one of my treasured possessions. But
And let's just say that was before the smartphone. We're going back. Okay, go ahead.
absolutely before the smartphone. Well, anyway, at one point during the shooting of our scene, I found myself seated, and Sidney Poitier came and sat next to me. I don't remember how it happened, but organically we fell into conversation. And I brought up the fact that I had read his autobiography, This Life. And in the book, he recounts his beginnings as an actor naturally, and he talks about auditioning for the Negro Ensemble Theater in New York. And he wasn't even quite sure what an actor did, but he was given this material and told to go up on the stage, and he was terrible. He had this really thick Bahamian accent. He could barely read at a third grade level. By the way, Sidney had been working as a dishwasher in and around, Manhattan, and that's how he was making his living. So the guy comes and grabs him by his shirt collar and throws him out the door and tells him to go get a job washing dishes somewhere. So stop wasting people's time. And Sidney goes walking off down the street, and he's like, how the hell did that guy know I was a dishwasher? So he's been determined to show this guy for the rest of his life. Sidney and I, we talked about that, and we laughed about it and really bonded. And he was so warm and so gracious. He was just everything that, you would have wanted Sidney Poitier to be. He was, you know. And we took a picture outside of the soundstage, perfectly positioned. Between us, there's the closed set sign for sneakers right there on the door. And after we were done, after we snapped the first one, I don't know who was taking the picture. I had one of those little instant cameras, and you had to advance the film. Sidney said, "Oh, no, let's take another one for safety." And without advancing the film, the guy took another picture. And I wasn't even thinking about that at the time because I wasn't taking the picture. It came out double exposed. Broke my heart, but you can tell it's me and Sidney. But yeah, that's my sneaker story, and James Earl was a wonderful guy to work with as well. You know, my James Earl story, if we have time.
Yes.
At one point, I played one of his men for the NSA, National Security Agency. And after we retrieve what we're to retrieve from Redford and the sneakers group, we exit the soundstage. And I'm wearing these shoes that are just clunking as I walk, clunk, 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 clunk. And the sound guy goes, "Can we get?" And my shoes happen to be black. And what they would do, as you well know, they would slide these booties over your shoes so that you walk softly, little stockings over your shoes. And so the sound guy said, "Hey, can we get some black booties over here for Tony?" And James Earl turns and says, "Black booties? I want some." To hear it in that voice, the voice of, Darth Vader,
That's
uh, you know,
hilarious.
CNN, to say black booties was hilarious. I think it took us like 10 minutes to recover from that laugh.
Oh man, that's
Yeah,
great. That is
yeah.
great. When you are working on a project, how do you research the part, the role, or do you research when you get a job, whether it's one line or a guest star, or you're in a movie, or even working on your own stuff? Do you do research for it?
Yes, but every role is so different. The research process is completely different. Like I just did a film called The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat, which is under Emmy consideration for any Emmy voters that might happen to be watching or listening. That role required very little in that because my character begins in 1968 in a Midwestern town. I lived in a Midwestern town in 1968 in a black community, much like my character Earl. I knew this guy instantly. I knew how because these guys were all around
So
me.
you already had stuff to pull from.
I knew what he ate. I knew how he dressed. I knew the music he listened to. I knew how he parted his hair. I knew how he shined I knew these guys. They were all my father's friends. So that job required very little in the way of research. Alternately, I've played in recent years a number of cafe owners, and one was a guy. I was on a show called Queen Sugar,
Mhm.
which shot down in New Orleans. And I had never been to New Orleans before, and I had to become very familiar with, Cajun cuisine because that's what my guy would have been, that would what he'd been serving to the community. So I had to research that and just become familiar with some of the spices and just the way restaurants run. Every job is different, so the approach to research is going to be different. I don't know how to fine tune that, but yeah, you have to definitely look into your character's background. At least I do, to have some kind of understanding of where they're coming from.
Now I want to talk about researching behind the scene, be it the director, the writer, the producer, who you're going to be working with. Do you research them? Do you find out what they've done?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I get an audition, it'll have first thing I look for is who's directing. Because at this point, especially if it's television, I start seeing names that I've worked with before. So I always give or if it's a writer that I've worked with before, I always give my agent a heads up. Look, I did, an episode of ER with this particular director. I did CSI Vegas with this particular writer. I think it's helpful if you forward that to casting and let them know that, I'm kind of in the family. Yeah, and also if you look at the producers' credits, you kind of get a feel for what their sweet spot is, the tone and the genres that they like to work in, especially the tone. That's the most important thing, especially now that we're doing self-tapes. I'm pointing over here because that's my little creative space area. Because now that we're doing self-tapes, you don't have the luxury of going into casting and they're giving you redirect. You're doing it in a vacuum now. You have no one to tell you. So it's vitally important to look at what those producers and those directors have done in the past, so you'll have an idea as to how to approach the role. How to deliver the dialogue, the pacing, the slight nuances that you see. Like, for example, a show like Queen Sugar is a really good example. Let's just use the two examples I cited. It's a very slow-paced show. We can talk like at this pace, like I'm talking to you right now, and very real. There's nothing affected about it. Whereas a show like CSI Vegas, which I did 2 episodes of, the dialogue snap. You can't sit there in the pocket and emote. You know what I mean?
No
What you're doing is
pauses.
just telling the story.
There's no
Yeah,
pauses.
there's no pauses. You just tell. So you have to kind of understand the genre you're working in, understand the director that you're working with, and the producers, and then you look at some of their past work, and you'll know how to approach this new project.
Let's talk about self tapes, because you come from the old school of we go into the audition, then we go to the callback, then we go to the final call, or maybe go to the networks for approval to see. You get your screen test, you find out, did you do it? Did you make it? But now it's all about the self tape. What have you learned about doing self tapes? Well, actually, it started before pandemic, but pandemic made it, that's the law now.
Yeah. Coming from the old school, it was a very difficult adjustment for me, especially coming from the live theater. That was my outlet for live theater. When I went to an audition and I walked in that room and I auditioned before the casting director and the producer, and like you said, then there was a callback. Sometimes they'll tell you in the room, "Oh, can you come back at 3 o'clock this afternoon?" And then you walk out into the into the waiting room, and everybody doesn't know that you got a callback. You got to be back at 3. But anyway, yeah, and then like you said, sometimes there was even a third, or they book you. But in any event, that was a very difficult adjustment for me. And I remember the first time I got a self-tape audition was from my Southeast agent. Guy calls me for Atlanta, New York, New Orleans. It was for a movie called Thank You for Your Service, and it was for the role of a PTSD counselor. And it was really the biggest role I'd ever been considered for in a major motion picture. And I was very excited about it. And they said they want a self-tape. And I was like, oh, okay. I had never done a self-tape. I had never seen a self-tape. I had no idea what they even looked like. And I had props. I had, furniture. I'm walking around performing the scene. And my agent, he calls me and, rips me a new one because he said, what the hell is this? But guess what? I booked it. But I later learned I made a good friend on Queen Sugar, Ninja DeVoe, who just texted me a little while ago. She's the one who really taught me the art of the self-tape. And that was a learning curve, not only just producing it myself, but having someone else to read with. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times I'll record the other characters on a separate device and leave enough space for my character to speak, and I'll roll that video, and then I'll roll the audio tape of the other characters and tape myself talking to myself. It's very schizophrenic.
Well, there is actually a wonderful company called We Audition, and they will actually provide you with real live actors, and you can pick and choose who you want to read with. It's a wonderful, if you go to weaudition.com, just saying, for all you actors out there who don't have anybody to read with, it's the service is not that expensive, and it does make it better. Again, you are so enterprising. You're like, okay, well, I got to do that. All right, let me read their lines, and then I'll put it in while I'm doing my lines. Let's do it.
A lot of people think that's crazy, but having to schedule other people is a pain in the rear end to me. And I just don't like having to call my friends, hey, can you read with me today at 1 o'clock? Or are you free today? I don't want, I never had to do that back in the old days when I would go to auditions. So now I just said, you know what, the hell with it. I don't want to read with anybody. I'll just do it myself. But occasionally there are those roles that are so complicated that I can't do it myself. So I have a few friends that I will call upon in those times. But for the most part, I do it myself.
So give me 3 things or 4 things that Ninja taught you about the art of doing your self tape.
She gave me a wonderful backdrop. That's not really
Very
teaching me.
important. Yeah, but that's very important.
Just a great black backdrop. Told me that I needed a ring light, which I have. I just really applied what I had been doing, in the room to the self tape now. And the one I think were, and I've taped other actors. I'll do it for them for free. That's how I give back. But the one thing that I impress upon, especially younger actors, is that most of the time, young actors are so anxious to show that they can act, as opposed to just being. And that's what I studied under Bea Richards, and she was the most wonderful acting teacher I ever had. And she taught us to just be the character, not put on some kind of facade. Just put yourself in the circumstance of the character and react accordingly. And that's what most young actors miss because they're trying too hard. And that old adage about doing less, less is more is so very true, especially when it comes to the camera, because it doesn't lie. It picks up everything in your eyes. Your
Right.
eyes are the window to your character. So you definitely just don't want to do too much. And I think that is one of my takeaways from, doing self tapes is that I've kind of learned where that sweet spot is. At least I like to think so.
Also, listening, right? Being present. You talk about being, but it's also being present and listening. Listen, because you could have an interpretation of the material, but somebody can come in and do something totally different. And if you don't listen to how they are responding, how they are talking, it's like 2 different performances. They're not connecting. They're going separate ways. And I think with self-tape, it's evident when you're not listening to what the other person is saying or what you've taped on the other side, that they need, you have to take it in. You gotta, what did you just say? Because going back to the eyes, everything shows up in the eyes.
Hmm.
And something I learned in acting class was watch a project, turn the sound down, and see if they're telling the truth.
Oh, I love that.
Because you don't really get it if you're watching it the first time.
Hmm.
There's so much going on, you're trying to get everything. But if you watch something the second time, you can, and you turn the sound down, or you watch a foreign film or a foreign TV show, when the actor is telling the truth.
Oh, I love that, Lydia. That's a wonderful note.
Yeah, because their body language is telling you. we
Hmm.
we're Americans are lazy actors, especially in Hollywood. We act from here. What about the body? What's happening with the rest of the body?
Well,
Hey,
because in film acting, you don't move around a lot.
yeah, but you still have to be present in your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the lie. That's a lie that we are told. You don't move a lot, but you are alive. And so you have to, if you say something to me that is not good, my body is going to respond to you.
Yes.
I can't just go, well, Tony, is that what you think? No, it's go, what, Tony? Oh my
Right.
it's up to the sound guy to fix the sound. I cannot be bothered with you, sir.
You know what that reminds me of? Last year, I auditioned. Was last yeah early last year I auditioned for a production of King Hedley III out at A Noise Within.
That was in Pasadena. Was this August Wilson?
Yes, and I had kind of worked on a monologue, and when I got to the audition, something the director Greg Daniel asked me to he told me, he said, use the room. I didn't have a clue. I was like, you want me to move around? In my mind, I'm thinking, you want me to move around? I haven't moved around in 10 years, since Billy Markham. I don't know how to move around. I'm so accustomed to standing in front of the camera and talking to somebody else and trying not to be a distraction or use my hands too much, that I was so rusty. Actually, I got cast as an understudy, but that's definitely a muscle that I need to go back to and work on again, is learning to use my body again. Because sometimes in television and film, you can get rather flat-footed. So,
And you gotta stay present. This is our instrument. We have to stay present, and it's even more imperative when we're only doing a couple of lines. Going
mhm.
back to that, the beginning of our conversation about, as actors of color, sometimes those roles are not there for us, and we get these little bites,
Right,
and then we're like, okay, and it's like, no, still be a person, because that is going to, it's like Viola Davis, when she did Doubt, she just had one scene,
and a
but
brilliant one.
she worked it. She brought her theater experience and worked it. She wasn't worrying about her nose running, or, she just was there, honest and pure. And and that's what got her nominated.
Yeah,
It's not, whether we have one line or the whole script. It is about how we show up as actors. What are we bringing? What is it that makes us stand out? It is important. I was just thinking about being a scene stealer. I have been a scene stealer. Yes, I have. I don't care.
right,
Hey, you hired me. I'm gonna do my work. It may not, you're not gonna. You can give me notes, but I'm still gonna deliver a person. I'm not gonna. Well, thank you very much. And so, you have to
right.
find, not to over dramatize the one line, but you got to breathe. You got to bring it in there, because that's the other side of just doing a couple of lines, that you don't give a life. It doesn't have to be exaggerated, but you are a person. Just be you. Just be you. What's the line? Just be you. and
Yeah.
and if you're an animated person, it's going to be animated. If you're just being true to who you are in those lines, it's going to bring stuff to it. So I didn't want to go off, but I am a stickler about acting and how important it is to be present, to be anchored, and to treat it like it is the first time. It is always the first time when you're doing the scene, whether it's on stage or in film. It's always the first time. You cannot phone it in. You can't, because you're going to get work based on what you did the last job. If you phoned it in, that director might know the other director and say, oh yeah, I worked with her. Ooh, don't hire her, she was
And
terrible.
it can be very difficult. It's a challenge, because I did a film a couple years ago called National Champions. And my big scene takes place at like in the penthouse of a luxury hotel, at a board in a boardroom. There are a number of us, so very accomplished actors all around the table, and all of us, are chopping it up. All of us going at each other. And I got to tell you, I can't tell you how many times we did this scene that particular day, to hold on to the spontaneity, to hold on to, delivering that character as if you're saying these words for the first time, when actually you've been doing it all day, is it can be a bit of a challenge.
But here's the thing, and I learned this early on: you don't know what shot of you they're going to cut. as an actor, yes, you may have to do, if you're working with David Fincher, you might have to do 50 takes of that same line. And
Right.
he don't play. He's, I don't care. Do it again, do it again. So you mentally, as the actor, have to go, okay, what is it that I want? Okay, I'm doing it again. How do I make it different this time? Am I listening? Sometimes it's just taking in the other person. To me, only me, I see it as craft. If you have craft, you can find ways to get to that thing. And the more you work on stage, for those actors who have just started working on camera, stage is so valuable because you gotta do it fresh every time. And there's no place to cut on
True.
stage. If you mess up, you gotta keep going. If someone heckles you, you still gotta keep going.
If you drop something, you got to pick it up and keep going. Yeah.
You gotta acknowledge, oh my God, the the set just fell
Right,
down.
right.
Okay. And you have to keep going. You can't, you got to be truthful. As actors, we have to be truthful. How do you bring this stuff? It is about excellence. It's about, and I have to say this because I grew up in the 60s, where it was ingrained in me to be of excellence, and that I had to do things better than my counterpart, that I always had to bring my best. That's how I was raised. I was raised during the civil rights, where we were fighting for the right. And we're back there right now. We're fighting for the right to be regular, to be like everybody else. We're back in that place. God, Jesus, help us. But to bring your A game, to come, to be that actor that you can nail it on the first take. And if you got to do 20 takes, you still nail it, because you don't know what cut they're going to use of your performance. And the worst thing that can happen to an actor is that you give 90% your best, but then that one take, you were tired and you just blah, blah, blah. That's the take they're using.
Yes.
And that's the take they're using. So you have to mentally, when you will go in front of a camera, you mentally have to say, oh, I am going to make sure that I am on point every time. I don't get a lot of opportunities. So this is it. I don't have that. I don't have that luxury. I don't have that Brad Pitt luxury that, okay, can we do it again? Don't use that one. I didn't like that one. We don't have that luxury. So
Right.
for me, as an actor of color, I learned early on, you hit your mark, you do your stuff, and you come ready. You don't play around. You come on time. You know that part of being an actor is just as important as being cute. It's just as important as being cute. You can be cute, but you better know your lines, and you better
Well,
know
Q
the
comes easy to
material.
you, I know.
So not always, but just the fact you have a reputation, that this industry, because it's a very small industry. It is
Yes.
so small. Everybody knows everybody, especially, the Black community, the Latino community. We all know each other. And even if I don't know you, I know somebody who knows you very well. And all I need to do is go to that somewhere and say, oh my God, Tony sucked today on screen. He was horrible.
And don't get it twisted. You don't want to you want to keep your nose clean.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean, like, when I got a job on The Neighborhood, CBS, the sitcom with Cedric the Entertainer. It was all done but the shouting. And my agent said, we're just waiting for network approval. I said, well, what is network? Well, they do a background check. They want to make sure, you're not some raving lunatic on social media or what have you. So, I'm not telling anybody how to live, but you want to keep your nose clean and stay out of other folks' business, and watch what you post on social, because it does not go away. And I just got a commercial a couple of months ago. I guess By the time this airs, it'll be all good. I did a Liberty Mutual, and again, background check. So, and my agent was telling me about a young lady, a client of his, who had gotten booked on a commercial. In the middle of the shoot, they came and fired her from set because she had an OnlyFans, you know. And even though there was nothing provocative about her, just bathing suit stuff, I guess. I never saw it. But there was nothing, of a pornographic nature on her site. But that was enough. Just to have an OnlyFans was enough to fire her. So I would also advise any young actor listening, be careful about your social media profile. You want to keep it a little PG.
So
You
let's
know,
talk about that, because you have some rules that you've instituted for yourself regarding social media. What are your rules?
I don't take pictures with drinks in my hand. I don't do politics. If you want to,
Oh man, I just missed. Oh man, I just blew it. Go ahead.
I'm a very political guy. You want to know my politics? You want to know my politics? Call me, and we can talk about it all day. But I'm not going to put it on social media. You may like what I stand for. You may dislike what I stand for, but it's not important. It's not important enough for me to make some post that 50 people are going to read and think that's going to change the world. It doesn't. It would do me more harm than good. So that's just my personal way of moving through this current space. I don't do politics, and like I said, I don't use profanity for the most part, either in post or doing an interview like this. It's just not my thing. I can express myself without, going blue. Those are my parameters. Those are the roadblocks I put up for myself. But again,
Uh,
I'm not trying to advise anybody else how to do it, but I'm giving you the benefit of my experience. You don't need to put thought, every random thought you have, both positive and negative, on social media. It's just not necessary. Who
I
cares?
love it. I love it. I think it's important as actors we use it as a publicity tool and not as a rant. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes.
As do I. Every once in a while, I might get sucked into a conversation. Yeah, so you want to be very careful about what you put out into the world.
Yeah, and use it to your advantage to really be calculating on when you put stuff out there. One of the other things about social media that is very important, when you get work, post it if you've been given permission. And if not, do not post a picture, but you can say, oh my God, I just worked on this great project. I can't wait to share it with you. That's a way to get around the NDA, because a lot of studios, a lot of TV shows, a lot of production companies do not want you to start posting it before it airs.
Everybody does the NDA now.
And so to be very mindful, you might be very excited and go, oh my God, I just booked a job, but be mindful. Wait, there's a time for it. Again, let people know I just went on an audition. Don't share the audition with us. We don't really need to know it. That's not going to help you. But
Yeah.
to share that you did go on an audition and let us know, oh my God, it was so thrilling, or I did a self-tape. Oh my God, it was so hard for me. I learned something new. What can you tell us that we want to come back to and watch you? We don't want to see you having meltdowns, because that only lasts for a little while. Then they move on to the next meltdown actor. You
Right.
want to be able to put stuff on social media that you get to have integrity and dignity, and that we get to know who you are as an actor. We get to see you in your craft, in your beauty as an artist, and not some knucklehead.
I concur wholeheartedly.
Something I heard you say, and as you've gotten older, and you mentioned that the last 10 years you've had a resurgence of your career. You've gotten much better roles. You're working with A-listers. And you're older now, so you have a different perspective. What would you tell your 20-year-old self that you now implement when you're working with A-listers?
I don't think there's any way that I approached working with Redford and Poitier, in 1992 any different than working with J.K. Simmons and Uzo Aduba and Anjanou Ellis today. I've always been that guy who kind of understood these people aren't necessarily going to become your best friends. You're working together this day. Take a shower, be pleasant. For me, if I could give my 20-year-old self some advice, I'd say work more on your life outside of acting. Marry younger, have more children, buy a house, travel more. All of these things you think might be a distraction to your work, but with the right partner, you can do incredible things. And the travel and the life experience, all that's going to inform your craft as you move forward through it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think more life experience I would have had because I was so focused on acting and coming along in my 20s that was all I was thinking about. And everything else be damned. That's all I wanted. And it's probably why I got wherever I got, you know what I mean? Because of my focus and my determination. But if I could go back in time, I would make my life more well-rounded.
Are you a goal setting person? Do you set goals?
Not so much anymore. I'm kind of enjoying where I am. Early on, it was I got to get a recurring role on a primetime series. Then I got to get a really key supporting role in a feature film. I went through all those phases, but now I'm just at a place where I am what I am, and I'm working on a screenplay right now. I wrote a Christmas movie last year, which I think is wonderful. And I'm getting that out to the best of my ability. I had an idea for a new screenplay, and even I got two rom-coms cooking in the back of my head too. So, goal setting in terms that I would like to produce these films, but I can no longer do it on $50,000 like I did
Mhm.
Tatiana or $20,000 like I did Section 8. I need Netflix behind me, or I need, a studio behind me in order to do what I want to do now. I guess I am goal setting, but there's no time stamp on it. I got to get this done by January 1 or, June 1st. That doesn't exist for me anymore. I'm just enjoying my journey because I also understand that there is no there. There is no destination. There is only the journey. So, yeah, I'm goal setting in terms of I like to produce these films that I'm writing. I like to continue acting on a certain level. I'm not going to do tiny supporting parts anymore. I don't want to do those anymore. They don't interest me, and I don't have to anymore because I'm okay.
Absolutely. You actually answered two questions. I was going to ask you about acting being a journey and not a destination, and you put it all together in there.
But let me tell you this: the Christmas movie I wrote, there's no part in it for me. I didn't write it with Tony Winters in mind. You know what I mean? There's nothing in it that I want to play. And I wrote this screenplay, and I was like, wow, that's the first time I'd ever written anything without myself in mind. So I don't know. I think that's growth and maturity, and also compartmentalizing, being able to separate, the actor from the writer, having this wonderful story, and not trying to, crowbar myself into the script, into the story.
Well, just as you're being creative, you are seeing a bigger picture, right?
Yeah,
You're seeing a bigger picture. It's like, oh, okay, I want to do this now. I want to, it's still creating. It's just you're not the focus like you were. And it's
right,
understandable when you're younger, you are trying to get yourself out there. You're
right.
trying to get people to notice you because who else is going to push you? So that's very understandable.
Yeah.
What are your top five favorite films?
Cooley High, The Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, The Sting, five. You need one more.
Okay, so instead of five,
Okay.
tell me what movie has impacted you as an actor that either propelled you to Sometimes we see a movie and we go, oh my God.
Rebel Without a Cause. I'm sorry.
All right. Very
That was my
good.
number five.
Okay. Very good.
What movie has compelled me to want to be an actor?
Or to be better in your acting career.
Oh, okay. I got a good one for you. Do you remember Ragtime?
Yes,
Starred Howard E. Rollins Jr. as Cole
absolutely.
House Walker Jr.
Milos Forman directed.
Yes.
Hmm.
I remember I was in college when that movie came out, and I went and I was still kind of wrestling with, do I want to spend the rest of my life, pursuing this acting career? And I watched Ragtime, and this new sensational actor named Howard E. Rollins Jr., and I was blown away by his performance, especially that scene he has with Moses Gunn towards the end of the movie, where Moses Gunn plays Booker T. Washington, and he comes in and tries to get him to give up and give himself up and faces justice. And Howard E. Rollins was so authentic, so organic in that role, and I was so moved by his performance. I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. As a, as a young kid, I remember being impacted by Rebel Without a Cause. I thought James Dean was the coolest dude on the planet, and I remember wanting to be James Dean. You know what I mean? Let me also include The Verdict with Paul Newman. I think that's when I first became aware of an arc. Because remember when we meet him, he's this alcoholic, down and out lawyer, and he's given this case, and it's supposed to be he's open and shut. He's supposed to settle it, with
Hmm.
but it becomes his cause celeb, and we see him clean himself up and become passionate about bringing justice to this woman, and it becomes his arc. And I was like, wow, an actor can really take you on a journey from one place to another. And I think that was the first time I was kind of intellectually aware of that. And again, that was one of those moments where I said, I want to do that. I want to do that, you know.
And who are five actors that really have ignited you?
Well, the aforementioned Sidney, you couldn't grow up in my era and not, you know, admire Sidney Poitier. Marlon Brando. Have you? I'm sure you've seen A Streetcar Named Desire.
I've seen all of
I can
Brando.
only imagine what he was like on stage. He's like this, just unbridled Stanley Kowalski, and you can tell even some of his lines are improv. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, this dude is just a different. He changed the whole game. So I was really a huge admirer of Brando. Uh, I like James Caan. I liked his cockiness and I liked his toughness and Pacino. I really like the many of the roles that Al Pacino did. Of course, as Michael in The Godfather, Dog Day Afternoon, or and Justice for All. When he's in the courtroom and he's like, "I'm out of order. You're
You're
out of
out of
order.
order.
This whole court's out of order." I said, "Man." I've always been so in love with the acting profession. I've always wanted to do those kinds of things. So,
And Justice for All. Let me tell you about that movie.
okay, please.
I saw that movie like 4 times. I think I had been in Los Angeles maybe a year at that point, a year and a half, and I had a job at Casablanca Records, which was on Sunset Boulevard and right near Crescent Heights. My first 3 months, I had to take the bus to go from West Hollywood to Pasadena, deep in
Well,
Pasadena.
that's a long ride.
It was a long ride, but I would come into Hollywood from Pasadena on the weekend so that I could go see And Justice for All 2 times. So I come early in the morning and just be able to see the movie on Hollywood Boulevard. And again, I don't know if you remember, but the theaters on Hollywood Boulevard and in Westwood were so grand and they were so opulent. It was such a treat to just sit in the theater a Sunday and stay there all day watching the same movie, because back then they didn't kick you out. They didn't kick you out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that movie made such a difference for me because I was learning acting. I was here. It was my first year and a half where I was immersed in acting classes, and when they would say, what's your inner thought, what is it that you really want, it's not in the line. And I remember watching Pacino and going, he's doing what I'm learning, he's doing what I'm learning, look at
Right.
that. How, like when I can't remember the Christensen, I think the last name of the actor was the black actor who was in drag, and he's going to defend him. Wonderful actor. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but he's going to defend him, and he's in drag, and he's telling what he's going to do, and the guy put his hand on him, he took it away, and the line was so anti what he did. It was like, I'm gonna take care, don't touch me, don't touch me. I just remember that his work. Well, I love acting, I love actors, and when you see them really working, it's amazing.
De Niro in Raging Bull. I just thought that was off the chain. A lot of people talk about Casino or, and De Niro in The Deer Hunter, that scene where they're playing the Russian roulette in Vietnam. I just thought he was off the chain. I mean, I remember when Robert De Niro films were like an event, because he didn't do a movie every month. When he had a movie coming out, you knew you were going to get taken on a ride. And so I got to tell you, De Niro was one of my favorites, especially growing up.
And I think you have to add heat to it. His performance in Heat. Here's the bad guy who you are rooting for. It was the first time that I had rooted for the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And I was pro Pacino, but not in that movie. I was like, yeah, right. Hero, you do it. Come on, you got to get away. I thought to me, that was another one of those moments that, as an actor, that you're seeing two magnificent actors.
Yes.
And they only have one scene together. They're sitting at the diner. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. I watched
it very recently. Yeah.
And what blew me away, just a little side note, was you had a Stella Adler student and a Lee Strasberg student at work. Oh, wow. I studied with Stella early on when I was like 20 years old. I studied with her for about 4 years, and she hated Lee Strasberg, hated him with a passion. And I was in class the day he died, and I thought, well, she's going to say something nice. And she came in and somebody said, Lee Strasberg died today. Good riddance. I was like, oh my God, no, she didn't, but she did not. But to be able to see these two actors that were taught by masters and how they were able to work together, for me, that was just delicious. That's all I can say. So I just throw that out there. So what do you want your legacy to be?
I guess that I'd like for the portrayals that I've given and the things that I've written to kind of widen the scope on African American life or an African life in the Americas, because so much of what we're being fed by the media is a very myopic view of the African American experience here. And, drugs and gangs and prostitution and those sorts of things, of course, are a part of our community, but it's a very small representation of who we are as a people. And I'd like to think that what I've done, when it's all said and done, is I'd help to uplift and brighten the light on who we are. That's what I imagine I would want my acting legacy to be.
Do you see a role in the future that you would like there's a character, there's a role that you have to do, that you say in the next 5 years, 4 years, I want to do this guy or this character? It could be historical. It could just be something that you see in your mind. Like, I would like to play that.
Funny you say that. The first thing I ever wrote was a screenplay about the life of Sam Cooke.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm still a huge Sam Cooke fan, and his life story practically wrote itself. And it's still something I'd like to do. I still have this screenplay, but I've aged out of it now. Sam Cooke was killed when he was 33. And so that was one that I would have liked to have done, but I'd be very happy directing another actor in that role, or just producing another actor in that role, if that would be my place. Um, but currently, uh, I don't think I'm giving too much away by saying, remember I said a moment ago that there's a screenplay I'm working on?
Mm-hmm.
It came to me uh, recently, Kevin Samuels. Do you know who he is?
Influencer who, yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Okay. Okay.
who passed away
Right. Right.
last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching some of his videos recently, and the structure for the screenplay kind of came to me in much the same way my
Mm.
Christmas movie came to me a couple of years ago. So that's what I'm tinkering away with right now, and it's one I'd like to play. I think I'm still young enough to do it, and I think I'm the right type, and it's going to be my screenplay, so therefore I can do
Yeah,
it.
make it fictional, tweak it, make it fictional so it's yours and nobody can sue you because you invaded
Yeah, he's
their
gone
royal
now,
their
so
stuff.
there's nobody to sue me. And
Well, we don't know his estate. We don't know what's happening with his estate.
he does have a daughter, but he didn't. The challenge to that screenplay is that he didn't leave a lot of breadcrumbs, and he gave us the broad strokes in a series of interviews that did over the last couple of years before his death. So the challenge for me as a writer is kind of connecting the dots. How did he get from A to Z? So that's what I'm working on right now, and I really love to do that one. It would make a lot of people mad.
How
I don't know if you're
exciting.
familiar with his
Oh
philosophy,
yeah, I am. I am. He was
but yeah, make a lot of people mad. And that's what you want. You want to keep them talking about you,
yes,
not about me,
yes,
but about my
yes,
screenplay.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Well, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat. I think it's going to help a lot of actors out there who want to do more than just wait for the phone to ring. And you really gave a lot of great pointers and great information to help the next actor coming up. Our job now as elders is to help the youngers coming
each
in.
one teach one.
That's right. I'm a big believer, just
Yeah,
like I was
I
helped.
have a handful of mentees that I work with. So that's one thing I always encourage. Don't sit back and wait on Hollywood. You'll be a very old person waiting for them to make you what you want to be. You know,
Never wait for somebody to give you what you can get yourself.
right on, right on.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Lydia, for having me. I really appreciate this. You took me places I didn't expect. Most people want to talk about, national champions or the Screams at Earl's or Queen Sugar or Days of Our Lives, all the more commercial things.
I want to talk
You
about
want to talk about the stuff that I
you.
did.
I want to talk about you and your journey and because that to me is what is interesting, right? We get jobs, we lose jobs, but our journey, what is the journey? Because we are leaving breadcrumbs for the upcoming actor. It's like this is how we did it. How can you do better? We didn't have, I mean, if you look at it today, there are so many classes now, there's so many opportunities now for actors to get the information. And that's why I do Acting Smarter Now, is to give actors the information that I didn't have and you didn't have when we were coming out. Yes, we had Samuel French, but there was no playbook for us. There
No,
was, there was, well, this is how you do it. You kind of fumbled your way through, and being an actor of color, we really didn't have any kind of guidance. We
right.
had to figure it out as we went along, and the good thing, going back to community, is that we got put into community where we were embraced, and so and so told you the next step and so told you the next step, and then you could tell so and so. You talk, your handle for Instagram, which I love, is Pretty Tony Winter. Well, let me tell you, for those of you who don't know who Pretty Tony was a character in the movie The Mac. And The Mac was a big deal to me because Max Julien was one of my first mentors when I came to Los Angeles. I worked at a radio station in New York as a teenager. And when I was coming to LA, my boss at the time, was good friends with Max. And she told him, Lydia's coming out there, look out for her. And he did. And for maybe the first 4 years of my career, he was so instrumental in giving me guidance and listening to me and encouraging me. I lived in Pasadena. He would come pick me up and we go out to Santa Monica to the pier, and he would, just give me information. He'd ask me, so how was acting class this week? What did you learn? What did you do? And he just treated me with so much love. I had this big brother who just cared for what I was doing. And my family, I couldn't share that with them. I couldn't say, well, I had acting class today and I did that. But he was so gracious and so giving. And one of the last movies that he was working on, he never got to finish it, but he gave me a role in it. I got to do this scene, and just how he directed me and worked with me, it was just great. And to be able to be in the company of another person of color who wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. For people who don't know who Max Julien is, he did a movie called The Mac, which is an iconic film today. But he also did another movie called Thomasine and Bushrod, which was one of the early love stories of two Black people in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he also wrote one of the early action adventures for a Black woman called Cleopatra Jones.
He wrote Cleopatra Jones?
Yes,
I did
yes,
not know that.
yes, yes. Max was amazing. He had so much that he wanted to contribute, and I think had he been born around now, he would be a superstar.
Let me tell you this real quick. I told you I was at a party and I was talking to a major TV star.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another TV star I was talking to, Glenn Turman. Well, I should say a
Then
star.
another icon of ours, yes,
Who was in Thomasine and Bushrod.
who was in Cooley High.
Yes.
The star
But
of Cooley
he's one
High.
of my idols. He's one of my idols. And so Glenn and I were both getting a adult beverage at the bar. And we're acquainted. We're not best friends, but we're acquainted. We get to chatting. And he says, what you been up to? I said, I've been doing this and I've been doing that. What about you? I said, you've been getting on those horses because, he's
Yes, he's
might
a
be equestrian.
cowboy.
Yeah.
Yes, him
And he said,
and Reggie Dorsey.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
And he said, well, as much as I can, man. I said, well, you got to, because Jomo bad. Jomo shoot your babies. And he stopped and fell over because that was his line from Thomasine and Bushrod. He said, man, where'd you get that one from, man?
That's
I said, that was
funny.
the line. I remember that for the rest of my life. Jomo bad. Jomo shoot your babies. But that's exactly where I got the name from. Pretty Tony was
Pretty Tony.
my
Yeah, when I
tribute to
heard you
Dick
say that, I was like, what? What? I need to bring that up. So
Well, that's awesome.
yeah, for
I,
those of
I
you who
never knew
don't know.
anybody that knew him personally, so that's awesome
Oh
to hear
yeah.
that he was that wonderful a human being.
Yeah, he was outstanding, just outstanding. And
Yeah.
yeah, he passed it'll be 2 years ago that he passed during COVID. But yeah, he just was. And he also was a health freak. He was
Oh,
the first person that I knew that juiced,
oh,
and
okay.
he had wheatgrass. And we're talking, this is 78. He was with the
Wow.
wheatgrass juices and all. I was like, oh, I don't know. He said, you want? No, I don't want any of that. No, I just want Coca-Cola, please.
Right, right.
But he was very ahead of his time, very progressive. So
Well,
we
that's real
love you,
nice to
Max.
hear.
Yes, we love you,
Rest well,
Max.
brother. Rest well.
Yes, yes, you did good. You did good. So thank you, because you did good too. I
Thank you, Lydia Nicole. Thank you for having me.
that
It's
we
a
got
pleasure.
to do this. And
This,
thank you, Tamara Twyman,
thank
for
you, Tamara Twyman,
connecting us back in 1984, 85. Thank you.
at the premiere of A Soldier Story is where we met.
Oh my God. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
that's when
So,
I met Lydia Nicole.
well, I'm glad I know you.
All
And
right,
I can't
darling.
wait to hear more good stuff from you. Tony Winters is amazing. He is so determined. He has so much passion and so committed. Not to mention, he is so full of joy. I loved talking to him and learning about his story, about his time in Hollywood, and how enthusiastic he still is about the business. I would love to know your comments. Hit me up. Let me know. And while you're there, why don't you buy me a coffee? Because I would like one. I'm thirsty. Thank you. Oh, but don't go anywhere because we have another great interview for you right now.